Welcome friends to another Dune video. Today we look to the Twisted Mentats. We examine where they come from, how they're different to regular Mentats, and give examples of some Twisted Mentats from the Dune Encyclopedia. This type of Mentat comes from Tleilaxu. They were different to usual Mentats. Their bodies were different in structure, emotional nature, and psychological makeup, and these could be varied to the customer's order. Now we can compare them to normal Mentats, who were also bred to have certain characteristics, but these would not be down to genetic engineering employed by the Tleilaxu. Mentats who trained normally, that training is based on each person's characteristics. Normal Mentats are chosen for their admirable traits, but not so with twisted ones, whose characteristics are made artificially and to order. For all the questionable characteristics made in these types of Mentats, there was a market for them. The one employed by the Baron is most well known in characteristics. He was a killer, a psychopathic one, and a good match for the Baron. Twisted Mentats, due to their natures, are met with much repugnance from those who meet them, but they could still be trusted with the secrets of great houses. Think of the Baron, a very smart, very sharp, savvy man, and how his operations, taking spice, he will have put a lot to the side, and he trusted his Mentat with that. Now in Children of Dune we get Duncan Idaho's opinion on Twisted Mentats. He suggests that they are a Tleilaxu hoax. Perhaps those brought under the tutelage of that race had filled their minds with the true Mentats school's teachings and then retrained to emphasize negative traits the original school would not have accepted. Duncan said the twisting was very fragile, and Twisted Mentats still maintained their own selfdom and dignity, refusing to be absolutely controlled by the great houses that bore them. The Dune Encyclopedia says these Mentats come from axolotl tanks rather than being trained in a school. Now I get a few examples of Twisted Mentats in the Dune Encyclopedia that have not been featured in the main novels, which I'll cover here as they're quite interesting. One was called Goya Solifar. He wanted to act for House Kryn in military intelligence and was given the role. He was used and performed well as an interrogator. He was a sadist. He was an expert in getting pain from his victims, but keeping them alive for the information that he wanted. In another example, two houses face each other in a private war, perhaps a war of assassins, but we're not told that. And for the conflict to be ended, it was to be decided via a game of chops, which is a 9-level pyramid chess game according to a quick Google search. One family first gained the agreement of both parties, I assume, that no rules-bound play, and they ordered a Mentat. Now in appearance you would not credit this Mentat with any greater mental facility than you would any other, but he made brilliant moves. For him, this game was everything. It was his life. And he was able to defeat the opposing house and win his side victory. And then the Mentat fell into despair when the tournament had ended, as the house had no further use for him. Another was Hamlet the Paralyzer. Asked for during the reign of Mikhail II, he was an unofficial roaming ambassador for the emperor and was greatly popular with the houses, who sought out his advice. But with that advice, he hamstrung the great houses. And the Dune Encyclopedia tells us, so great was his computational ability, but so involved and convoluted his arguments, that he provided his victims no valuable advice whatsoever. Points were met with counterpoints of such complexities that I can barely say, and intricacies that those who listened were rendered comatose by Hamlet's pale cast of thought. There are many other names put forward by the Dune Encyclopedia, but were given very little detail. Just one final one worth mentioning was a Mentat whose entire life was on the focus of creating an alternative to the spice, but he failed to perfect this, and with it the raising of his great house. And one other thing I'd like to mention, in the Houses trilogy by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, the Harkonnen Mentat featured in the original Dune novel is in that, but strangely he actually dies in that, and that really surprised me when I first read it. And then I realised that the Tleilaxu, as they did with Duncan and the Golem many times, could just bring him back for him to be featured in Frank Herbert's first book. And now we'll finish this with the Dune Encyclopedia. The final point to be made about Twisted Mentats is that some were more twisted than others, and a few not very twisted at all. Nevertheless, because the mentats produced by the Tleilaxu were so often warped and bizarre in nature, they came universally to be regarded as objects of repugnance. And now, friends, I turn things over to you. Drop me a comment down below.